Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. As always, I'm Lewd Neko, and joining me is Spooky Dangerous.
Hello.
And today we are going to be a couple of haters because
Yeah.
we're going to be taking a look at a somewhat well known or maybe memed on game, My Femboy Roommate.
It's somewhat notorious. We've actually had it in our to look at pile for quite some time because it kind of pops up on my radar. I'm like, well, this is in the niche that we create stuff in, and had a look at it, and instantly was like, okay, this seems AI generated, but is not disclosed. It has a lot of people following the project, and then now recently it was banned and or removed from Steam. So I think there is certainly some controversy for us to dig into. But did you want to start by kind of giving us a little bit of maybe a summary of what, maybe what the dream of the game was supposed to be?
Yeah, so this is, I guess, like a pretty typical, like cut and dry, sort of short erotic visual novel. As the title implies, in this game, you are playing as a super cool indie game developer who needed a roommate. You get a femboy roommate. Shenanigans happen.
Oh
It's
shit.
pretty short, a couple of hours, so don't expect, the odyssey from this, but it's sort of pretty like typical, like, oh, there's some like teasing and oh, what if we held hands, ooh woo kind of bullshit, and then it just becomes a lot of butt sex.
Classic. Love to see it. So what about where did it all go wrong? Because that doesn't sound terrible, right? Like if you knew nothing else about the game and that was the pitch that you got, that doesn't sound so bad. Where did it all kind of fall apart?
Well, this game, as well as I believe this developer's other game, Monster Tutor, and they already have another one coming out that's like a spooky Halloween femboy one or something like that.
Yeah, haunted
All
by
have
Femboy.
AI generated
Yeah.
art. 100% AI generated, just kind of quote unquote cleaned up a bit. Presumably by the dev, because there is no one listed in the credits who does this work. So I'm guessing that. Or they have just chosen not even to credit the person who's cleaning up these images, which would be insane. And they are also particularly stealing the art style of Afro Bull, which many of you who enjoy hentai in the chat, you or in the story or comments, I guess,
That's
have
chat.
you've probably seen him before. He does a lot of different fandoms. Tons of art. A lot of people actually thought he did the art for this at first when they looked at it, because it's very clearly imitating his art style. But nope, he was not involved at all, just stolen from.
Yeah, I think Afro Bull is probably like a really big creator in the space. I know them from comics that they've done. And in the same way that we saw Benefits Ship was like really successful, really seen on launch, was because the artist that they partnered with, Soulcate, had a really big following on the get go. So I'm wondering if this game or this developer Lewd Neko is trying to specifically target an artist style that has all this goodwill or whatever built up already to try and capitalize on the audience built for them.
Yeah, I mean, it unfortunately makes sense in like the awful capitalistic hellscape way of like if you saw an artist who was doing their best and being really successful, then AI bros are like, yes, let's steal their art style
Yeah.
and just make stuff with it so we can make all of the monies and not have to pay an actual artist to do unique art. Of course, it should be mentioned that like, it's a very pale comparison if you have any eye for like detail or art or design or even like character design. It's very generic, especially if you like do a side by side with some of his actual work. You can see the kind of references to his art style mostly I find in like the eyes and expression and like the general look of the coloring. But there's not as much of that like creativity as far as like poses go, because as we know, AIs struggle oftentimes with bodies and hands, so they kind of go for more of the like easily repeatable sorts of generic, I would say, like sex poses, like, being bent over or like being put in a full Nelson, things that have been drawn over and over and over again.
Yeah, and let's talk about hands for a moment. You sent me a whole bunch of screenshots from the game, all of which it felt very intentional that their hands were hidden, even in like scenarios where it wasn't necessary. What like betrayed the actual posing of the thing. There's like a weird crossed arms tucked one where when you naturally cross your arms, you should have one hand kind of on top that can't vanish completely. But it was definitely like he had tied his arms in a knot instead, and it looks weird and flat. And a lot of, I mean, the hair is kind of a mess for consistency across the whole thing, and it just really feels like the recipe for not like a lot of slop and shovelware is like usually accused of being an asset flip when like you could maybe argue that the backgrounds are an asset flip because that's kind of what I assume that they're from, but then the character itself is just AI generated, so no money invested there. If the background is an asset flip, which is, I don't know, something cheap or free or stolen, again, that costs nothing. Ripping off the back of an existing artist's, market and all of this kind of stuff. Again, it's just it feels like this really parasitic recipe for success where you have a lot of this short-term gain from people excited to try out what the thing is because you got that marketing. It looks good on the outset or whatever, and then they open it up and it's just dog shit on the inside. As a studio, you in theory should fall apart because people realize that it is not actually good. But the dagger to the heart that you kind of revealed to me before we started recording is that they do actually have a lot of patrons on the Patreon. So I'm really trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong and trying to make good games when instead maybe I should be making bad games instead.
Yeah, just on their Patreon, I think they might also have a subscribe star. They have 9,000 plus paid members. This game itself costs $5 to have the full version. There's a
Okay.
demo that's released right now. And the thing is, like I said, in a relatively short period of time, they are basically they have their next game coming out, I think probably in the next couple of months or so, or maybe it's a Halloween release, but that's 3 games in a really short period of time. And I think that speaks to me that right now in sort of adult gaming circles, the average consumer, emphasis on like consumer in the most derogatory sense, is just need a new thing, new thing, new thing, new thing. It doesn't matter how trash it is. It doesn't matter how mediocre it is. It doesn't matter how short it is even. I just need something that I can be excited by for like a week and then put in the trash and never think about again.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity problem, right? All of the existing kind of developers, THM included, but also looking at stuff like Venus Noir, looking at a lot of the other the smaller developers like BB Ben, who makes Lord Goblin, all have that same kind of Patreon cycle where they're trying to do one or two things a month so that they kind of stay relevant. They have slow updates coming out and they're like keeping the Steam relevant so that the algorithm on Steam pushes the game. And there's this opportunity problem where there's a thing called churn where it's like really, really common with OnlyFans. It's really common with stuff like Patreon where people come on for a month, they consume all of the backlog of content and then they leave. And like this can be like just like one day, like they go on Patreon, they download all of like their recent posts of the games and they leave. This happens on THM Patreon all the time. This is possibly our greatest percentage of income is from people doing this, and I understand like it's slow waiting for content to come out and you don't want to be on the hook for the subscription the entire time, and so it makes sense for the subscription thing. But it means that you're coming in, you're getting this short burst, you're trying to get as much content as you can, and you're moving on. But the opportunity cost problem is you're seeing so many things that are long running, like all THM projects are long running, and we encounter this sentiment all the time where I literally got a comment on Twitter that gave me the shits the other day, so fuck you if this was you. But it was literally like, oh, sick, THM has a new game. I'll see you in 5 years. It's like, brother, it's a fucking live service model. The point is that we're releasing content monthly, three weeks a month for patrons. That's the whole point. The game's never going to be complete as long as we continue to get support. And so rather than encountering a product when it's complete, you get to, you know, go through the journey of it. And when people are constantly looking for what's new and shiny, if they've already seen something or seen half of something or seen a little bit of something, it's a lot less new and exciting. It's not the, oh, this could be good, you know, that opportunity, you know, problem where they're like, well, I just want to attempt as many times as I can, like a slot machine, right? I'm going to keep sinking, and then maybe I'll find something amazing, but I'm going to keep trying until I get there. And it just means that stuff that comes out and you encounter it early and it's not great, then it's just kind of given up on forever. It's like the No Man's Sky thing. Like, No Man's Sky comes out, people are like, this is fucking horrible. And then it like actually took 2 to 3 years for people to start being like, wait, actually, this game's kind of good. Because they worked on it the whole time and started to make it good. Instead of going like, hey, this thing has a lot of promise. If the developers are going to commit to this, I can see the vision for where it might be. And like, you don't necessarily have to be engaging with it the entire time, but like understanding that it's not condemned, it's not shit forever, it's not game over, you know? And so instead, this business model, what Lewd Neko is kind of doing, which is, even the studio name is a rip-off.
It's like Nutaku.
Exactly, of an existing thing. It's just trying to...
And that's another, like, shitty, terrible website.
I know. It's just trying to capitalize on the hard work of other people in the space, churn out as quickly as possible the most minimum viable product. Because in theory, if this comes out and it gets banned off Steam, but they sell 10,000 copies or whatever in the first week, it doesn't matter. Like, you've made the 1 day's worth of work that you've put into it back immediately, right?
Yeah, and I should mention... the reason why Femboy Roommate got banned on Steam was not due to AI. Steam does allow for AI-generated content as long as it's disclosed. As we found out, this is also a new ruling that Itch.io has been rolling out over the last couple of months. Currently, none of Lewd Neko stuff has a very clear AI-generated art warning. It has a mention about AI-generated translations, but I could not find a AI art disclaimer. So who knows what'll happen with all of that. But the reason why Femboy Roommate got banned off Steam was actually due to kind of like age baiting, or like this character looks underage even if you say they're 18, which is stupid. I don't agree with that, and I think Steam has a long history of using that ruling in insane ways. But I am kind of like, well, the enemy of my enemy, you know?
Yeah, it does feel like it's awkward that Steam is not consistent with the underage ruling. However, when things do break the rule, they should be gone. I don't think this game broke the rule. I don't think it was intentionally generated to be an underage character. I don't look at the character and go, damn, that's a 14-year-old or fucking whatever. Like half of the Japanese lolly market that I wish would die and never have to deal with again. It's my greatest gripe with ever having to read Eastern hentai is that it's 50% lolly and I'm not interested. Whereas instead, my Femboy Roommate gets nuked for an unrelated reason, but very much deserved to die. And so I feel like I can't complain here. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yes, we're gonna jail Pablo Escobar for tax evasion because we can't catch him for any of the other things that he's doing. Is kind of the vibe I'm getting here, even though there's absolutely no way that's how Steam operates, but kind of based of true. And it's just, I don't know. We operate so often with, you know, the kindness and the patience and looking through what a game is to try and give it a chance. You know, like we've played games in the past that were bad, but like we engage with it in a way where it was like, okay, what were they trying to do? What happened to it? We played Foodafix Dick Dine and Dash, which is a bad game, arguably, but...
At least it has real art and animation.
It had real art, it had animations. They made a big attempt to rehaul it onto a different engine. That was what caused a lot of the problems, and I think ultimately just made them drop the project because it's like this, you know, is it actually worth investing their time to fix it and make it work again? Maybe not, and then now it's stuck, right? So I get that, right? An attempt was made. It's better than nothing or no attempt, like in this game, whereas everything is just kind of stolen. Every single business practice that we uncovered seemed horrible. And it's just really shady in general, right? When we first discovered
and
it,
I mean,
it's
even,
kind of so
even the actual even the actual like gameplay elements, and I'm using that term very loosely, were so boring. It's essentially a stat raiser. You have a couple of stats that the femboy has that you have to raise to see the next scene, essentially. And how you raise those stats is just by you click a button to make money because you work from home, so you don't actually even have to like go anywhere, like interact with anything outside of the house. And then you buy things for him or you like spend time with him, and that makes number go up. And that means you have to spend a lot of time with your hand on the control key as you skim through the same 10 scenes you've seen like over and over and over again. And there's really like no time system, or like it didn't seem like there was much of like a punishment if you take too long or if you do things in a certain order. Apparently there are different endings. I wasn't going to play long enough to find that out, but it's the bare minimum for kind of like, oh, a choice-based interactive game where it doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't feel fulfilling. It's just basically there to pad for time. It is there to just
Yeah.
extend the length of the game or to make it feel like it's not just slop. And I'm actually looking at the next game from this person who's coming out, Haunted by a Femboy, and it is literally, I'm not even joking, the exact same thing. The main character has the exact same body type, has fluffy, curly hair. They have the same exact pose where their hands are behind their back, which is what like people who are drawing anime when you're in middle school, that's what you do because you can't draw hands because you're like 11 and you don't know how to draw. But in this case, this creator just obscures hands in most of the CGs, except for like really obvious things like hand jobs, because the AI probably made them look bad, and it's easier to just have him chronically with his hands behind his back. They also, I've noticed, have a trouble with like they have the same expression in every single CG. For whatever reason, your femboy roommate is just chronically nervous. His brows are always like nervous and anxious, even when he's supposed to be happy or like comfortable around you. He's just chronically upset. Like someone get him some anxiety meds. I don't know what's wrong with him. And with this new one, it looks like this like ghost femboy is going to be sort of like the smug, bratty type. So he has just this shit-eating grin in every single image of him, because that's what I like to look at in a visual novel, is no like variation in expression.
Yeah, I mean, we get hassled because we have a 2D expression gallery of like only a couple ones. So like Sleep Shock has like the greatest range of them, and it's usually like 6 or 7 per character. To not even do that, or even just be able to Photoshop the face to be blank and then Photoshop in, you know, different expressions that they've generated, it just is such a lack of care. So it's, I don't know, it really does just feel like we're going to have Haunted Femboy and then we're going to have some other next
Like
Femboy, Dragon Femboy,
jock
or
femboy and then
whatever.
goth femboy.
Yeah. It's just capitalizing on a keyword that they know is going to be popular, having the art style that they know is going to succeed because they've seen Afrobull's success, and then doing the basest, most minimum work required to be able to call something a game. Now, what's interesting to me is that Steam TOS says that if you've logged less than 2 hours on a game, you can refund it.
You do what you want with that information when Haunted Femboy comes out.
Yeah, well, even you can look at my Femboy roommate in your Steam library and go, I played this for 15 minutes, and then you can refund it. Because that's something that I think about all the time. All of our games are still in early access, but they're all around the 1 hour 30 mark average, right? So that means that there's half of the people that play it are less than that, and half of the people who play it are more than that. And you get to see how it's all bucketed out, right? And the way that our buckets work is the biggest bucket is less than 20 minutes is the first bucket. And this is really common because a lot of people will just boot up the game to make sure it works and then like not actually play it and then close it. Be like, save it for another time. And then the second biggest bucket is 200 minutes plus. So this is the people that have been kind of following it all along, and they kind of open it for every single update and they stick around, right? And so it makes sense to have a reasonable average time. For something like my Femboy roommate, which I'm assuming is not going to be getting any content updates, it's done. It's making money. It's also just not on Steam, so what's the point? And then just how many minutes really could it have in the gameplay when it's just like this? And it's relying on a padding scheme where you are just, repeating scenes or whatever to try and get as close to that 2 hour mark, but I think it's still not. For a visual novel, you need to have so many words to hit that 2 hour mark. Shackles of Elsman is 5,000 lines of dialogue, I think. Something like that. I'll have to go and double check. I can't open it right now. But something like that, and it's still not at the 2 hour mark, right? So the game has to be substantially large for a visual novel because people are going to read through stuff pretty quickly.
Or they just turn on the skip all text and I just want to see the CGs and then I'm going to leave.
Do that too. Yeah. Skip right to the animated. In fact, there's games that I've played where I download the whole thing. I go to the options because it's a vampire game. You go skip all unread text. You fly through the whole thing, and then you just go back to the gallery and see what you've unlocked and look at it that way. It's easy. Or you just open up the files. There was a game that didn't secure any of the files, so you could just literally open up the folders and all the art files are in there, and then you just click through it like a fucking PowerPoint presentation, and then you're done. You're like, I've seen everything now.
I guess the only other thing to mention is they did actually have voice acting in this game, which I thought was interesting. I was kind of almost like, at this point, why didn't you just use AI voice acting? Because, and I don't want to shade the voice actor. I'm not going to mention them by name or anything, because I think there was two. I think there was one for the demo and then one for the full release, but they both seemed kind of like nobody's just new, extremely new, first project kind of voice actors who are generally speaking going to underpay themselves severely because they don't know how much a voice actor should be paid, especially for a visual novel where you're gonna have to record a significant amount of lines. And it's definitely very amateur. You can hear some echo in the audio, which is a little strange, and you can kind of tell they're a little bit nervous or not super into this role, which again, I thought that was an interesting choice, I suppose, to even include it at all, since if anything, from what I noticed in comments on various threads, people seem to be it would have been better if it didn't even exist.
I wonder if it's like a box checker, right? So
yeah.
Go, what does this game need to have for people to click buy? Actually, do you know how much it's for sale for? It's like $5, right?
Yeah, $5 on itch.io.
American. So $7 to $8 Australian. So to bridge that gap to get people to spend that $5 dues, you've got to tick a certain amount of boxes, right? We talk about this a lot in marketing generally, where it's as a consumer, whenever you interact with a sale page or a Kickstarter campaign or any of these kind of things, you have an internal checklist of all the stuff, and unless if every single thing is ticked, you are unlikely to purchase that product. And it's kind of like generating trust with the consumer, right? Because they go, oh, this has value because it has these boxes checked, or I can trust the developer because they've done these things. And I'll give you some example of boxes, and voice acting might be one of them for a visual novel because it indicates that it's of a higher quality product, but you can't hear it until you are playing the game if it's not featured in the trailer, right?
Yeah.
So that's an easy bait and switch kind of a thing. You need to see some of the art in advance for literally any visual novel because the art stylist in there sells it, and when it looks like an existing popular artist, you go, okay, good, sounds all right. And then you have a good trailer, or you have a whole bunch of screenshots to show a bunch of things off, and then you're just trying to build as much trust as you can with the customer, and they go, oh, okay, this kind of checks these boxes. This looks like it might be a good game because it has voice acting, it has Afro Ghouls art in it, it has my particular niche. I just love femboys and all these kind of things, and they go purchase, and then they play the game and they go, I am actually so disappointed.
But yeah, this game sucks. Please don't support it. Please tell people who are talking about this game, at the very least, I hope they are aware that they're buying slop, because it seemed based on some of the comments, especially on places like Twitter and Reddit, people are so excited. They're oh my gosh, femboy game. And then someone would be you realize this is all AI generated, and they'd be wait, what?
Yeah. No actual femboys included.
I mean, I guess the only thing left to say is if you are an artist or a game dev who is listening to this right now and you're like, it's all over, I should just give up and throw in the towel. Don't. Because what I think this game actually speaks to is that I do think there is a huge gap for femboy visual novels or like femboy porn games where you are not playing as them and there's no Futanari, but it's just like either like male or like generic protagonist and femboy. There's really not a huge amount of them compared to how much demand there seems to be. There's like a lot of men, it would seem, who may or may not be straight. There was a lot of interesting debate actually in the thread about this game about sexuality and people like legitimately fighting about whether or not it's gay to be attracted to a femboy. But there's a lot of people who want this kind of game, and evidently they aren't being serviced by the current visual novel market. So if femboys are your niche, like gay femboys, please fix this. Please come up with a really good game and tell us about it, and we'll play it and we'll talk about it on here so that way we never have to talk about this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think it means that there is actually such a big market for just adult games in general to hit a specific niche. Like if you can find out what's being underserved, what's, has slop in it and is making money, then you should come in with a high quality product and instead dominate that niche. In my opinion, that was part of the success of Shackles of Elzen, because when it released 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was, there just really wasn't anything else that was so Fuda focused. And then since then, we've seen a whole list of things on Steam release, which is literally my Fuda underscore in the title, like my Fuda boss or whatever. And that speaks to a demand in the niche. And even though they are slop games, also they get easy recognition. It has in the title exactly what you can expect from the game, exactly what kink is being served, and so on. And so people will click buy, again, if it just checks all those boxes. So if you're a developer and you are looking for a horny NSFW project, then that is an easy way to do some market research. And if you have a game already, let us know in the comments, reach out to us on Twitter. We would love to play some stuff and showcase some things. We actually spend a lot of time looking at what games we want to talk about on the show, looking at what kind of people we want to try and get on for interviews. I've actually been reaching out to a lot of people recently, and some of them are like, oh no, I'm like really scared to, kind of reveal who I am or whatever, which we totally get. Or one of them was like, I don't speak English enough to be any good on a podcast. It's like, okay, I also get that. I don't speak any other languages. That's on me, homie. But we are trying to do our best to actually engage with other NSFW creators and get involved with this arena that we are all battling in, because that's the point of the Sexy Business podcast. Sometimes we need to come along and glaze some games, like we will next week, where we're going to be covering Me Side, I think is how you say it, which I'm very excited about. My Side. Neko streamed it recently. We are definitely going to be glazing this game. I think it is fantastic. And if you want to hear more about it, you'll have to stick around for next week, where we cover it in glaze. So stick around, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. That's the only way the algorithm gods will bless you with our content. And, type in a comment. Maybe tell us what your favorite adult game is. Or if you have played My Femboy Roommate, let us know so we can add you to the list. And we will see you next week on another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast.
Bye-bye.